Chapter 1. The Magician Engineer. To modern audiences, the story of Jack Parsons presents a contradiction. Rocket scientist, occultist, engineer, magician. The two worlds seem impossible to reconcile. Yet for Parsons, no contradiction existed. The universe was filled with hidden forces. Some could be measured, others could not. Both deserved exploration. By the late 1930s, Parsons had become deeply involved with the teachings of British occultist Aleister Crowley and an esoteric organization known as the Ordo Templi Orientis, or OTO. Parsons eventually rose to a leadership position within the movement's California branch. To many observers, Crowley was one of the most controversial figures of his era. Newspapers called him the wickedest man in the world. Religious groups denounced him. Critics portrayed him as dangerous, but Crowley saw himself differently, not as a devil, not as a prophet, but as an explorer of consciousness and hidden realities. His philosophy, known as Thelema, centered around the idea that each individual possessed a unique purpose, a true will, which they were destined to discover and fulfill. For Parsons, these ideas resonated deeply, because he too believed in destiny, not personal destiny, human destiny. The destiny of a species reaching beyond the Earth, and in many ways, the world of occultism offered something science alone could not. Science could explain how a rocket worked, it could calculate trajectories, it could predict outcomes, but it could not answer why humanity felt compelled to leave its cradle in the first place. For Parsons, the answer lay somewhere between physics and myth. The deeper Parsons moved into occult philosophy, the more he encountered a tradition that stretched back centuries. Alchemy. Today, alchemy is often remembered as a failed attempt to turn lead into gold, but historians increasingly recognize that this description misses the larger picture. Alchemy was never only about metals. It was about transformation, the transformation of matter, the transformation of consciousness, the transformation of the self. Medieval alchemists filled their texts with symbols: fire, sun, moon, Mercury, death, rebirth. At first glance, these images seem distant from the world of rockets and engineering, yet the similarities are difficult to ignore. Both alchemists and rocket engineers sought to unlock hidden power from ordinary matter. Both relied upon fire, both pursued transformation, both attempted to transcend limits imposed by nature. The alchemist used the furnace. The engineer used the rocket engine, different tools, a remarkably similar dream. Carl Jung believed that alchemy survived because it expressed something fundamental within the human psyche. A universal desire for transformation, a desire that never truly disappeared. It merely changed forms. As civilizations evolved, the symbols evolved with them. The ancient quest for immortality became medicine. The search for divine knowledge became science. The dream of ascending to heaven became aerospace engineering. The language changed, the longing remained. And nowhere was that longing more visible than in the life of Jack Parsons. To friends and colleagues, he seemed to exist between worlds, a scientist fascinated by magic, a dreamer building machines, a man equally comfortable discussing explosives and esoteric philosophy. Between January and March 1946, Parsons would undertake an experiment unlike any rocket test, an operation that remains one of the most controversial events in modern occult history. A series of rituals conducted in the California desert, an attempt to bring a powerful archetype into the world, an event known as the Babylon Working. Chapter 2. The Goddess and the Desert. Every man and every woman is a star. Aleister Crowley. The Second World War had transformed technology. Radar, jet aircraft, atomic weapons. The boundaries of the possible seemed to be dissolving. For many, it felt as though humanity had entered a new age. Parsons believed this transformation extended beyond science. Something larger was unfolding. A shift in consciousness, a new era, and he was not alone. Across Europe and America, intellectuals, artists, mystics, and philosophers wrestled with the same question. What would become of humanity in a world increasingly shaped by technology? For Parsons, the answer would emerge through rituals drawn upon the symbolic system of Thelema and on an archetypal figure known as Babylon. Accounts of these events survive through journals, correspondence, and later analyses of Parsons' life. To modern ears, the story sounds almost unbelievable. A pioneering rocket engineer conducting elaborate magical ceremonies while helping shape technologies that would eventually lead humanity into space. To understand the Babylon working, it helps to step away from the literal and consider the symbolic. Throughout history, civilizations have personified powerful forces through archetypal figures. War became a god, wisdom became a goddess, death became a ruler of the underworld. These figures were not merely characters, they were representations of ideas, psychological realities given human form. Different names, different stories, the same recurring patterns. From this perspective, Babylon can be understood not simply as a supernatural being, but as a symbol of transformation, liberation, creative destruction. The arrival of something radically new. And perhaps that is what fascinated Parsons most, because transformation was the defining obsession of his life. Whether in the laboratory or the ritual chamber, Parsons was pursuing the same dream, transformation through fire. The mystic sought to transform consciousness. The rocket engineer sought to transform humanity's relationship with the Earth itself. Two paths, one destination, to cross a boundary, to become something more. The Babylon working would later attract enormous attention because of one unexpected participant, a young man named L. Ron Hubbard. Years before founding Scientology, Hubbard moved within Parsons' social circle and became involved in events surrounding the rituals. The relationship would eventually collapse amid accusations, financial disputes, and personal betrayals. For Parsons, the aftermath was devastating. Friendships fractured, dreams unraveled. The future he had imagined seemed increasingly uncertain. Yet, even as parts of his personal life fell apart, another transformation was taking place. The world around him was beginning to resemble the future he had always envisioned. Governments were investing unprecedented resources into rocket technology. Military planners saw strategic potential, scientists saw opportunity, visionaries saw destiny. The age of rockets had arrived. While Parsons searched for transcendence through ritual and symbolism, the world was moving toward transcendence through technology. Soon rockets would leave the atmosphere. Soon satellites would orbit the Earth. Soon human beings would reach for the moon, and as humanity prepared to ascend into the heavens, it unknowingly began retracing one of the oldest paths in history. The path upward, the path toward the sky, the path toward the realm once reserved for gods. Chapter 3. The Ancient Road to Heaven. Earth is the cradle of humanity, but one cannot remain in the cradle forever. Konstantin Tsiolkovsky. Long before rockets, long before astronomy, long before science itself, humanity was already looking toward the sky. The heavens inspired awe, wonder, fear. They appeared eternal, unreachable, divine. Across thousands of years and countless civilizations, a remarkable pattern emerged. Again and again, human beings imagined the sacred above them. In ancient Mesopotamia, enormous ziggurats rose above the surrounding landscape. These structures were not simply buildings, they were symbolic mountains, bridges between heaven and earth. The higher one climbed, the closer one moved toward the realm of the gods. In Egypt, the pyramid served a similar function, a monumental structure connecting earth to the celestial realm. Its geometry reflected cosmic order. Its purpose was transcendence, a journey beyond the limitations of mortal existence. The pattern appears again in the biblical tradition. Moses ascends Mount Sinai. Jacob dreams of a ladder stretching into heaven. Prophets retreat into mountains. Revelation arrives from above. The sacred is elevated. The divine exists beyond reach, and humanity is called upward. The same symbolism appears across the world. Mount Olympus, Mount Meru, the World Tree, sacred peaks, cosmic mountains, celestial ladders, different cultures, different stories. A remarkably similar image, a vertical path connecting humanity to something greater. For thousands of years, ascent existed primarily as a symbol or a dream. The ancient dream became engineering, the metaphor became machinery, the ascent became real. The launch tower occupies a strange place in human history. It is entirely modern, yet it feels ancient. Its purpose is technological, yet its symbolism is timeless. A vertical pathway, a journey upward, a challenge to limitation itself. And nowhere is that tension more visible than in one of the oldest stories ever told. The story of a tower built to reach heaven. The story of Babel. A warning, a prophecy. When humanity finally built a tower capable of touching the heavens, the ancient question returned. Were we fulfilling the dream or repeating it? Chapter 4. Prometheus and Babel. Technology is a useful servant but a dangerous master. Christian Luz Lang. Every civilization tells stories about forbidden knowledge, knowledge that grants power, knowledge that could transform humanity, knowledge that comes with a price. Among the oldest of these stories is the myth of Prometheus, a titan who stole fire from the gods and gave it to mankind. For ancient people, fire represented power, creation. Technology, civilization itself. With fire came metalworking, agriculture, cities, weapons, the ability to reshape the world. Prometheus did not merely give humanity warmth, he gave humanity power, and power changes everything. Across the centuries, Prometheus became more than a mythological figure, a symbol of rebellion, innovation, and the refusal to accept limits. Again and again, humanity crossed boundaries that previous generations believed impossible. Each breakthrough expanded the horizon, each breakthrough carried consequences. The 20th century accelerated this process beyond anything history had witnessed before. Technology evolved faster than culture. Power expanded faster than wisdom. The same scientific discoveries that promised a better future also produced unprecedented destruction. Nuclear physics illuminated the structure of matter. Nuclear physics created the atomic bomb. The gift of fire had become something far more dangerous. Now, I am become death, the destroyer of worlds. J. Robert Oppenheimer. For the first time in human history, civilization possessed the ability to destroy itself. And yet it continued reaching outward, toward the moon, toward the planets, toward the stars. The drive to transcend limitation proved stronger than fear. In many ways, Jack Parsons embodied the Promethean archetype. He pursued forbidden ideas. He challenged accepted boundaries. He sought transformation through both science and symbolism. And like Prometheus, his life contained triumph and tragedy in equal measure. He dreamed of humanity reaching the stars, but he would never see its fulfillment. In 1952, Parsons died following an explosion at his home laboratory. He was 37 years old. The circumstances surrounding his death generated speculation for decades. Accident, sabotage, suicide. No definitive answer emerged. What remained was a strange legacy. One of the pioneers of modern rocketry had perished in fire, the same force he had spent his life attempting to master. Prometheus gave humanity fire. Babel gave humanity ambition. Together, they reveal something fundamental: the desire to touch the heavens. And perhaps no institution in modern history would embody that desire more completely than NASA. Chapter 5. The birth of a myth. The origins of modern spaceflight were deeply entangled with conflict. The same rockets that pointed toward the stars had first been designed for war. Technology rarely arrives in pure form. Discovery and destruction often travel together. The engines that would eventually launch astronauts into orbit emerged from the same century that produced the atomic bomb. The dream and the nightmare developed side by side. In 1958, NASA was officially established. Its primary intent, declared officially, was scientific, and its stated goal was exploration. Yet from the beginning, it quickly became something larger. Because the space race was never only about technology, it was about imagination, identity, destiny, and belief. The image projected to the public was at least as important as scientific achievements themselves. The astronauts became heroes, not merely celebrities, a distinction that matters. Celebrities entertain. Heroes embody ideals. Ancient societies had warriors, saints, explorers. Modern America had astronauts. They represented courage, sacrifice, intelligence, and discipline, the best version of humanity. Joseph Campbell spent much of his life studying myths from around the world. What he discovered was remarkable. Civilizations separated by oceans and centuries often told the same story. A hero leaves the familiar world, crosses a threshold, faces trials, obtains new knowledge, returns transformed. Campbell called it the hero's journey. And in the 20th century, humanity projected that ancient narrative onto space exploration. The pattern is unmistakable. Departure, initiation, return, the structure of myth, the structure of Apollo, the structure of countless stories told long before rockets existed. The technology was new, the narrative was ancient. The myth is the public dream. The dream is the private myth. Joseph Campbell. The deeper one looks, the more curious the symbolism becomes. Mercury, Gemini, Apollo, Artemis, Orion, Atlas, Saturn. Again and again, the language of modern space exploration reaches backward into the ancient world. Why do spacecraft bear the names of gods? Why do mission patches resemble heraldic symbols? Why does exploration repeatedly draw upon mythology? Mythology never disappeared, it evolved. Apollo was more than a program. Apollo was a symbol, the god of light, knowledge, order, vision. The choice was practical, the choice was cultural, the choice was symbolic, and perhaps all three at once. When Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin supposedly stepped onto the lunar surface, something extraordinary happened. Not merely technologically, psychologically, civilizationally. For a brief moment, nearly the entire planet focused on a single event, a collective ritual, a shared experience, a modern myth unfolding in real time. The moon had always belonged to poets, mystics, dreamers, lovers, gods. In the collective mind, it bore now the footprint of human beings. The sacred had become tangible, the impossible had become history. Chapter 6. Gods in the machine. The old gods never die. They become metaphors. Modernity often presents itself as a break from the past, a world guided by science rather than myth, data rather than symbolism, reason rather than belief. Yet the deeper we look, the more difficult that distinction becomes. Because even in humanity's most advanced technological endeavors, ancient stories continue to appear, sometimes in unexpected places. NASA's first human spaceflight program was named Mercury. In Roman mythology, Mercury was the messenger of the gods, a traveler between worlds, a guide who crossed boundaries others could not. The symbolism is obvious. Humanity's first astronauts would become messengers from a new frontier, travelers between Earth and the heavens. Mercury was followed by Gemini, named after the heavenly twins of classical mythology. A fitting choice for a program focused on rendezvous, docking, and cooperation in orbit. Then came Apollo, the most famous space program in history. Few names could have carried greater symbolic weight, and perhaps no mission better reflected humanity's ancient desire to illuminate the unknown. Apollo was not merely a destination, it was a story. Apollo transformed astronauts into mythic figures, not because they sought that role, because cultures naturally create heroes. The moon landing provided all the elements. A dangerous journey, a distant realm, a small group of chosen travelers, a triumphant return. The structure was ancient. The setting was new. The pattern continued. Artemis, the twin sister of Apollo. Orion, the celestial hunter. Atlas, the titan who carried the heavens. Saturn, a god associated with time, cycles, and cosmic order. Myths help civilizations understand themselves. Symbols were carried into space, much like the banners, crests, and sacred symbols that explorers, warriors, and pilgrims carried with them throughout history. Symbols are the language of things unseen. Some researchers see hidden meanings. Others see coincidence. The gods remain, not only in temples, not just in sacred texts, but in the names we choose, the stories we tell. Chapter 7. The Occult Space Program. For decades, NASA has occupied a unique place in the public imagination. Part scientific institution, part national symbol, part cultural myth, and wherever myths emerge, alternative interpretations inevitably follow. Over the years, a number of researchers have argued that occult, esoteric, or symbolic influences can be found throughout the history of the American space program. Among the most well-known examples is the book Dark Mission, The Secret History of NASA by Richard C. Hoagland and Mike Barra. which explores alleged connections between aerospace symbolism, mythology, hidden traditions, and unexplained anomalies within the history of space exploration. What makes it interesting is not only its conclusions, but also the questions it raises. Why do certain symbols reappear? Why does mythology remain so prominent? Why do powerful institutions often communicate through imagery rather than direct explanation? These questions extend far beyond NASA. Throughout history, symbols have served as tools of communication. Not because they conceal information, because they compress it. A single image can convey an entire worldview, an entire story. Every civilization develops symbolic languages. Modern societies are no different. We often fail to recognize our own symbols because we are surrounded by them. People do not live by facts alone. They live by stories. The space agency operates at the intersection of science and imagination. Its missions are technological. Its language is symbolic. Its achievements are measured in data. Its cultural impact is measured in myth, and myths invite interpretation. Some of the most controversial theories focus on Mars, particularly a region known as Cydonia. Since the 1970s, certain observers have argued that unusual formations photographed on the Martian surface may possess artificial characteristics. Most planetary scientists reject these claims, attributing the formations to natural geological processes and the tendency of the human brain to perceive patterns where none exist, a phenomenon known as pareidolia. Yet the debate reveals something deeper. When confronted with mystery, we instinctively search for significance. The unknown demands interpretation. The frontier has changed. The psychological function remains. The cave you fear to enter holds the treasure you seek. Joseph Campbell, Chapter 8, The New Alchemy. The real voyage of discovery consists not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. Marcel Proust. Every age inherits the dreams of the ages before it, often without realizing it. The language changes, the symbols change, the technologies change, yet certain ideas refuse to disappear. They simply evolve. Few ideas have endured longer than the dream of transformation. Lead into gold, decay into perfection, mortality into immortality. To modern eyes, the quest seems misguided, a scientific dead end, a relic of a less enlightened world. But beneath the strange symbols and coded language lay a deeper aspiration, the desire to transcend limitation. Transformation. Human beings leaving the Earth, crossing impossible distances, standing upon another world. For previous generations, such achievements would have appeared miraculous, not merely advanced, supernatural. Technological progress grants powers that previous civilizations attributed to gods. Instant communication, flight, artificial intelligence, genetic manipulation, machines that can see, machines that can learn, machines that may someday think. The impossible becomes ordinary. Then humanity begins searching for the next impossibility. Undoubtedly, civilization is entering a new phase, an era in which humanity will no longer merely transform the world around it. It will begin transforming itself. Life extension, genetic engineering, brain-computer interfaces, artificial intelligence. But at what cost? Technologies that challenge traditional definitions of what it means to be human. To supporters, these developments represent progress. To critics, they represent hubris. The questions sound remarkably familiar, questions once asked by philosophers. How far should transformation go? What limits should remain? At what point does progress become something else? The tools have changed, the questions have not. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. Arthur C. Clarke. History is rarely what it seems. Subscribe for more journeys into the hidden stories behind our world. This is it.